afternoon, everyone. Oki, assalamu alaikum, namaste, sasrikal. I want to thank Roxana and Rashid for inviting the Calgary Police Service, but myself particularly, to come and speak with you all this afternoon. I have to say I feel immensely privileged to be an ambassador of the CPS and the work that we're doing around equity, diversity, and inclusion. But I'm a little nervous to address you all today. I've had the privilege of speaking before the Chief and our executive leadership team, our police commission, City Council, but today I'm particularly nervous because my mother and father are in the back of the audience here today. And so those of us who are parents, yes, a round of applause for sure. Those of us who are parents know how important it is to go and see your children perform, participate, speak, but the children are equally as nervous because we want to make sure that we're meeting the expectations of our parents. So that's why I'm a little bit nervous. But that being said, like I said, I'm honored. In my current role, I'm a superintendent with the CPS, and I'm responsible for the Strategic Partnerships Division. So all the work that we do around our Racial Equity Office, crisis transformation, our work with diverse communities, hate crimes, and so on. A couple of my peers are also here today. Constable Anthony Au and Constable Randy Dalawa are also here. Randawa, sorry, I apologize, sir. And I want to thank my diversity team for the stewardship of the service's values and the work that they do tirelessly 7 days a week, 365 days a year. When I spoke to Roxana and Rashid about the expectations for today, they wanted me to speak a little bit about my story as an immigrant. And my story is unremarkable and probably not dissimilar to many of yours. So my parents were born in East Africa. My father was born in Uganda. My mother was born in Tanzania. Is anybody in the audience from that region of the world here today? Anybody from Africa? I see a couple of hands coming up there. So some of you will be very familiar with this story. My mother was born to an impoverished family of farmers. She was the youngest of 5, and her family worked hard and tirelessly to create a good life for their children, as we do for all of ours. My father, on the other hand, in Uganda, was born into a very affluential and influential family. They too were a farming family, and I've seen pictures of my father, the second oldest of 7 siblings, standing before a large plantation mansion, a big farmhouse, where they successfully farmed tea, coffee, and pineapples. By all accounts, they had an amazing life, and they'd fulfilled their dream in East Africa. As many of you will know, there was some civil unrest in the late 60s and early 70s, where the government of the day ordered all Southeast Asians, people that look like many of us in this room, were asked to leave that country and disperse. My mother had already gone to the United Kingdom. Her parents had sent her over there to pursue some schooling, and my father was tasked with closing up the farm and wrapping everything up before leaving. On the day before they left, I remember my father telling me this story very well. The police, the state-run police department, came in with their big rifles and their guns and ordered that they give up the keys of all their vehicles and of their houses and the outbuildings to the police so that they could be turned over to the government, or else we risk being executed. Of course, my father and his family did that. His family fled to the United Kingdom the very next day, and my father was tasked with taking as much material possessions as they could before he too fled. He and one of my second uncles were on their way to the airport, where unexpectedly they collided, if you can believe it, with a herd of elephants. This is in Africa, of course. My second uncle passed away, and my father sustained some grave injuries. He was flown by the Red Cross to Belgium, whereas the rest of his family was in the United Kingdom. The two never knew when they would reunite. They did, in fact, reunite, and my father spent a lot of time with his family at a Red Cross refugee camp in Stoke-on-Trent in the south of England. I've heard lots of stories about the camp. It wasn't a great experience, but there were resettlement programs, there were employment programs, vocational programs, and it wasn't long until my father and his siblings got a job doing some farming work at a farm. Through the hard work ethic that we all have, they quickly became promoted into different positions, and it wasn't long before my father and his siblings were selling produce and potatoes at a nearby market. My mother and father met, and as they say, the rest is history. Our lives were fairly unremarkable. My sister and I grew up in a fairly modest household. My father and mother worked hard, weekends, evenings, second jobs, overtime shifts, call out wherever they could to provide for us. I recall that our house was often cold. We didn't have money or means to keep the heating on all the time. And in the United Kingdom, the winters get cold, much like they do here. But still, we were happy and we were surrounded by a lot of love. When I was 10 years old, my father passed away, regrettably at the hands of an impaired driver. It was perhaps one of the most tragic and life-altering things that happened to my sister and I. My mother tried her best to raise us and provide for us as best as she could, and because all of our family was here in Calgary, we decided to relocate to Calgary. Times were tough. I got a chance to experience the court process firsthand at 10 years of age, where I had to attend a fatality inquiry and meet firsthand the person that had killed my father. That being said, we had a couple of choices. We could be bitter, or we could make life better, and that's what my mother and my sister and I decided to do when we moved here to Canada. I finished high school here in Calgary, finished university, began volunteering up at the Calgary Remand Centre, where I fell in love with the Calgary Police Service. My mother was not a big advocate of me being a police officer, for all the reasons that we will understand. It was expected growing up that I'd become a doctor or a lawyer or something similar to that. And of course, given the experiences that we had had back home with police, it wasn't really a renowned or coveted vocation. But she supported me. She attended my application process, all the physical and psychological testing that we had to go through, and it's a testament to her that I'm here where I am today. I want to talk a little bit about my early career with the CPS as well. We talk about today being the start of a conversation about racism and equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I've been with the CPS for 23 years now, and our organization has made some leaps and bounds in that time. But I wish that this conversation had started 25 years ago, or even 200 years ago, for all reasons that we can all understand. You see, racism, both overt and systemic, has been a pervasive issue in all institutions: religion, education, health, and the justice sector. A small story of when I got on with the CPS, I was in recruit classes, and towards the end of our 6-month training, all of the officers in my class, there was 24 of us in total, were asked to pick which districts we would like to go to. I lived up here in the Northwest, and so I picked District 1, which is the downtown core, District 3, which is in the central Northwest, and District 7, which is where I lived. All of the 24 people in my class got their number one pick of the district that they wanted to go to, except me. I was assigned to District 5, which is in Northeast Calgary. I inquired of my staff sergeant politely. I said, how is it that 23 of my 24 colleagues got to go to the district that they wanted to go to, and how come I got to go to District 5, which is as far away from my home as remotely possible? And I was told, you'll do well there. I hear some laughs and some chuckles around the room. I didn't say much. I was new, I was impressionable, I wanted to make a good impression on my leadership team. I went to District 5, where, God willing, I served well for 3 years, and it was an amazing experience for me. As I joined the CPS, I wanted to integrate. I wanted to be part of the organization. I wanted to be part of the culture. As my mom will tell you, I bought a pickup truck. I started to change the way I dressed, and I started to listen to music that I wouldn't have otherwise listened to because I really wanted to fit in. And it wasn't until later in my career that I realized that we shouldn't be ashamed of the identity that we bring, the lived experiences that we have, or the richness and the diversity. But the organization just wasn't ready to embrace it at that time. In fact, it wasn't until 2020 that CPS acknowledged that systemic racism does exist in law enforcement institutions such as the CPS and other sectors, as I've mentioned. And acknowledging systemic racism was probably the first step towards meaningful change. This required that the organization start to listen to the voices of the marginalized and to better understand experiences before working together and charter the path forward. I have the privilege today of overseeing the Racial Equity Office, and I can tell you that we've done some amazing work over the last 4 years. One of the biggest challenges around addressing systemic racism is that it's deep-rooted. It's deep-rooted and embedded in policies, practices, training. For the CPS, which has been in existence for over 150 years, it's difficult to dismantle some of those systemic barriers to access that don't often have the best outcomes for racialized, newcomer, and equity-seeking communities. We understand that we have to have a change in mindset, and this requires having us be committed to the long-term in a meaningful and sustained way. One of the things that people both internally and externally are frustrated with is that change is taking a long time. You have to remember, it's taken us about 200 years to get here. It's going to take more than 4 years to undo some of the wrongs of the past. As far as what CPS has done around reforming how we serve all Calgarians, first, it's around education and training. We have continuous education for our members around cultural competency, how to address and be aware of implicit bias, and anti-racism more globally. We believe that by equipping our officers with the knowledge and tools to recognize and address their biases, we can have a more inclusive environment and more equitable service delivery to our community. The second is around community engagement and trust. We understand the importance of connection and relationship building with all communities. The connection is the foundation of community confidence, after all. Building strong, trusted relationships with the communities we serve is essential, but that requires active listening, transparency, and collaboration. Police officers are good at taking charge and making decisions and saying what will be done. But when we change our mindset, we have to be a little bit more self-aware, reflective, and listen to communities as to how we can reform how we serve our community. One of the things I spoke about with some of the other panel members during the social session there is that the CPS prides itself on having great relationships with the community. But now it's time for us to change those relationships into partnerships where we can co-create service delivery together. In order for the community to feel confident about building those relationships, we have to look for other ways to serve communities, not only in the times that they need us when things are going bad, but also in times of celebration, in times of social connection and opportunities such as these. Policy work is also another place that we have to take a look, and it's hard work. Like I said, our policies have been in place for hundreds of years in some cases. We need to make sure that our policies promote equity and are not disproportionately favoring one group over another. This includes everything from recruitment and hiring practices to use of force policies as well. Communities have asked us that they want to see a police service, your police service, that looks and understands the culture, the language, the religion of all communities that we serve. This means that we must actively recruit and promote individuals from diverse backgrounds and create an inclusive environment where everyone feels valued and respected. Earlier, I spoke about my own trials and tribulations about being a racialized police officer. And as I was speaking with somebody earlier, we have to understand that in all sectors, whether it's health, education, law enforcement, when we invite racialized individuals into our organizations, we have to remember that they're wearing two hats. They're wearing the role of the ambassadorship of the organization, but also the role of the community member first. And so it's important that our policies and practices ensure that those individuals are getting the support that they need to be able to serve their communities and the community at large in an effective way. This work requires courage, commitment, and as I said, collaboration. So as CPS moves forward, let's remember that this is a journey. It's not a one and done type exercise. CPS has to remain vigilant, open-minded, continuously evaluating our progress, and be willing to make adjustments as needed. I'm confident that through a strong leadership team, we can create a police service that truly embodies the principles of equity and inclusion and what Calgarians expect of us. Our police service should not only protect, but also respect and uplift every member of our community. In closing, I once again want to thank Roxana and Morshed for their time and dedication to uplifting and empowering the voices of racialized Calgarians and immigrants. This is important in building a better future for us together, not for now, but into the future as well. Thank you.